Good morning. We ready? Okay. Xavier Becerra, Chairman of the Democratic Caucus, joined by Vice Chairman Joe Crowley, our colleagues Judy Chu of California and Stephen Horsford of Nevada. We're here after a morning Democratic Caucus meeting where we had a discussion on any number of fronts, but most of the time focused on immigration reform because Democrats in the House believe that we can not only get this done, but we should get this done. We were interested to hear some reports on what people around America are saying, but before we talk about that aspect of what Americans are saying, we wanted to make sure we recognize something else that's very important on the minds of so many Americans, and that is all the families in the state of Washington who were devastated by Saturday's mudslide. And we want to express to each and every family member in the state of Washington who's been impacted our thoughts and prayers. We want to let folks know that in a conversation we had with our colleague Susan Delbeni of the state of Washington that we offered whatever assistance we could be to her and her colleagues from the state of Washington as they try to move forward in trying to conduct the search operations to find all those individuals who still are missing. And we understand it's somewhere over 150 individuals who are now reported to be unaccounted for. And so we want to make sure that we are providing our colleague Susan Delbeni and all our colleagues from the state of Washington whatever not only moral but material support that can be offered by members in the House of Representatives as they move forward. Also want to mention briefly that we are gratified that the President has taken such a forceful approach when it comes to the issue of the Ukraine. We agree with the President that that Ukraine's sovereignty and its independence must be respected. International law demands it, and we are gratified that the President has moved aggressively and forcefully to take actions to make that point, working with our international community, and especially with the G7 partners who are making it very clear that we are not interested in watching a country act as a rogue participant in community affairs. And so we'd like to see our Republican colleagues join with us as we try to work forward with what the Senate did on a bipartisan basis. Close to 80% of senators voted in favor of an action that would provide Ukraine with material support and assistance and would also sanction Russia for its activities in Crimea. And we hope that in the House we can continue to hear reports about an effort to do some horse trading to try to get some things that are totally unrelated to Ukraine in an effort to try to get a bill passed. So it would be unseemly, I think, if our Republican colleagues in the House and the Republican leadership in the House try to engage in horse trading tactics to get something that doesn't relate anything at all to Crimea and Ukraine and has everything to do with politics and the Koch brothers. We would hope that that's not true, those reports we are hearing, that our Republican colleagues in the House may hold up this package of support for Ukraine and sanctions against Russia in order to try to cut some deals that deal with politics and political giving. But returning now to the issue of immigration, 272 days. That's how long it's been since the Senate passed on a bipartisan basis its immigration reform bill that set forth a common sense path to deal with a broken immigration system. It's been 6 months since in the House of Representatives we introduced bipartisan legislation, H.R. 15, to try to move us forward in the House. Yet throughout that entire time, House Republican leadership has not permitted one single vote on a common sense solution to immigration reform. Not one vote. The only thing that we have voted on is a vote to eliminate the Deferred Action Program for dreamer young men and women in this country who are trying to move forward. And we think it's unfortunate that in the House of Representatives we can't get one vote. And so we are here to say that we will persist. We must have action. And we demand a vote. So we say to Speaker Boehner, give us a vote. Give the American people a vote. By 8-2, Americans want to see us fix this broken immigration system, including an overwhelming number of Republicans throughout the country who agree. And so clearly, Republican leaders here in the House of Representatives are not only out of touch with America, they're out of touch with their own Republican constituency. And at some point, if they can figure out a way to vote over 50 times to repeal or dismantle the health security law that Americans now can count on, you would think that they would give Americans a chance to have a vote to fix a broken immigration system, especially since today, hot off the presses, the Congressional Budget Office, the fiscal referee, nonpartisan fiscal referee for the Congress, said that passing H.R. 15, the bipartisan common sense immigration reform here in the House of Representatives, would reduce the budget deficit of this country's government by $200 billion, more than the Senate bipartisan immigration reform bill would do. It's time to have a vote. And we believe that if you can have all those votes to dismantle an important health security law, then by God, put country before party and let Americans have a vote on finally fixing a broken immigration system. With that, let me yield now to my colleague from New York, the Vice Chairman, Joe Crowley.
Thank you, Chairman Becerra. Before I comment on immigration reform, I just want to piggyback on the comments the Chairman made in regards to Ukraine, the situation in Ukraine and Crimea as well. This demands swift action and forceful action, as the Chairman said, and that's what the President is calling for. What I think would be really ironic in many respects is understanding in the House possible horse trading that may be going on is the possibility of one rumor that we would delay new IRS rules on political donations in exchange for a pathway forward on IMF rules changes that are being sought in the Senate language. Interesting, overwhelming bipartisan support in the Senate for the IMF language to help bring economic relief to Ukraine right now when it desperately needs it. So I hope that we do move swiftly and really take away those political dynamics of it. It'd be interesting for bolstering democracy in Ukraine by helping them with this monetary assistance, and at the same time in a deal to diminish democracy here in the United States. That would be truly ironic. But on the issue of immigration reform, we have another, yes, a discharge petition, the immigration discharge. That's because we simply have stalled. The House Republicans have stalled over and over and over again on bringing a bill to the floor. Is there a certain degree of frustration? You better believe it. But we're not nearly as frustrated here on the Democratic side of the House as the American people have been. They want to see us have action, take action on comprehensive immigration reform, and that's what we in the Democratic Caucus are doing. We're using every procedural motion we can to bring this issue to the forefront. And we have before us really the rainbow of support throughout the United States. And there's a little bit of green in that rainbow as well. And as we heard last week from the Taoiseach, the Prime Minister of Ireland, who so passionately and poignantly put it to the Speaker at the St. Patrick's Day lunch that was held last week, just before we broke for our work in our districts, district work period. When he passionately asked the Speaker to bring up an immigration bill this year, to not let it languish once again, he talked about funerals that are taking place where people actually hold their cameras up so that their loved ones here in the States can witness the burial of a parent or a sibling. And that's not just happening in Ireland, it's happening throughout the world. But Ireland itself has held a special place in terms of its relationship with the United States, a small little island that from time to time needs relief. America has been the relief for that island, and once again sees that help needed again. But it's not just there, it's all around the world that have helped contribute mightily to the productivity of our country. And that passionate plea by the Prime Minister touched me personally. I know it touched Leader Pelosi. I know it had to have touched Mr. Boehner as well. And we hope that it will do more than touch Mr. Boehner. It will actually get him to move on comprehensive immigration reform this year. And with that, I'll call upon Judy Chu from California's 27th.
Thank you so much. I just came back from my district where I have so many Latinos and Asian Americans, and the dominant question that they ask is, when are you going to have a vote on immigration reform? Well, now's the time to put a discharge petition on the floor to force this issue, because there are so many people whose lives are at stake. We have 11 million that are living in the shadow, living in fear, subject to never-ending exploitation. We have 4.3 million that are waiting for their families to come together, and they have been waiting even decades to get their families together. We have over a million young people, dream students, who have been educated in our schools and could contribute so much to this country if they could only become legal in the only country that they know. There is every reason for Republicans to support this discharge petition. In fact, we just saw a poll today that said that 70% of Republicans support comprehensive immigration reform. And today we heard from the CBO about an issue that Republicans care so much about, which is the deficit. This is a bill that could reduce our budget deficit by $900 billion over the next 20 years. And so this is something that is critical for the entire country. This is why we have to get something done now. And I urge every Republican to sign this discharge petition so that we can address this issue and make sure that we move ahead as a country. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Representative Stephen Horsford, member of the Homeland Security Committee and another lead sponsor of H.R. 15.
Thank you. It's good to be here with Chairman Becerra and Vice Chairman Crowley, as well as the chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific Islander Caucus, Judy Chu. And I want to highlight something that happened that really moved me personally. Last week in my district, I held a hearing on immigration, detention, and deportation. Congressman Gutierrez attended, as well as Congressman Hinojosa, the chairman of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. One witness, Brian Rivera, told us his story. Brian's mom, Thelma Martinez Soto, came to the United States at age 25, looking for a better life and to start a family. She's never been in trouble. She's not ever even had a parking ticket. But her life was difficult. Brian told us that his father abused his mother while she was pregnant with him. Brian told us that my father has terrorized my mother's life. He was eventually convicted of domestic violence, and soon after she worked up the courage to leave him and focused raising me into a man. Thelma worked 2 jobs so that Brian could attend the Le Cordon Bleu School of Culinary Arts. Brian says he hopes to provide for his mother just as she does for him. Unfortunately, Brian's father recently re-entered his life and turned his mother into ICE to prevent her from demanding he pay child support. He told Brian, "Remember, your mother's an illegal immigrant, and I can get rid of her." And that's just what he did. Because our system is backwards and broken, his mother was detained, and Brian was left to fend for himself. His mother, who was the victim of domestic violence, became the victim of a broken system. Just think about that for a moment. A loving mother raising her son, who has been through hell to provide for him the best that she possibly can, was detained at the hands of her abuser. It is perverse, it is disgusting, and it's absolutely heartbreaking and what's wrong with our current immigration system. Brian's mother was detained for nearly 4 weeks, until last Tuesday. Brian came to our hearing and told us his story. Fortunately, we were there to help, and his mother was released. After the hearing, Brian spoke with Congressman Gutierrez, Congressman Hinojosa, and myself, and working with Congressman Gutierrez and his staff, we contacted ICE. She was released on an order of supervision so that she can prepare her case to seek legal status in the United States. We're going to help Thelma and find asylum through a visa for victims of abuse. Now, while this is a victory for this one family, we have Brian's mom and moms like Thelma all over this country. His story is the story of thousands, so many who live in the shadows, who are afraid of the law that is supposed to protect them. And when you live in the shadows, it's lawless. You are at the mercy of others, and if they are abusive, there's very little that you can do with confidence that you or your family will be okay. So it feels like you're not safe and that you have no peace of mind. And this is why we need to fix our immigration system, not only for dreamers, but for their parents. The United States should not be in the business of separating families. So, Speaker Boehner, we've asked you to bring up H.R. 15 for a vote. We will move forward with the discharge petition because one person should not stand in the way of the will of the majority of the American people. We have the votes. Now we just need a vote. And as my colleagues have stated, the recently released CBO report confirms that if you don't want to do this because it's the right thing to keep families together, like Brian and Thelma, then do it because it will help reduce our deficit by $900 billion over the next 2 decades, including $200 billion in the first decade alone. It's time to demand a vote. Speaker Boehner, we want a vote. It's time to pass comprehensive immigration reform now for the families who desperately need it. Thank you.
To Congressman Horsford for what he has done to keep a family together, we want to say thank you, Stephen, for that work. And that's what has to happen. We have to fight to keep families together. We have to fight to fix this broken immigration system. I have 2 charts that I want to show very quickly before we go to questions. Let me start with this first one. This one right here. Stephen and all of us have said it's time for a vote. The reason we say it's time for a vote is because when Speaker Boehner became Speaker back in 2011, one of these things he said is he was going to make sure that under his leadership, the will of the House would move forward. Well, the will of this House, as you can see from this chart, is that there is a majority, a clear majority of Republicans and Democrats who would support a common sense fix to our broken immigration system. Mr. Speaker, if you are still believing that the will of the House should dominate, should command this body, then, Mr. Speaker, we demand a vote. Give us a vote, Mr. Speaker, because the majority in the House of Representatives supports common sense immigration reform. And you're blocking progress. You're blocking Brian and his mother, Thelma, from having an opportunity to know that they will be able to move forward, and millions of other families. You're blocking America's ability to have the kind of border security that it needs, and you're blocking our economy and millions of Americans who want to be working, blocking their opportunity to move forward economically. Last chart I want to show is one that shows why this is so discouraging to see. While we know that the House of Representatives has a majority of votes in support of common sense immigration reform, we know that the vast majority of Americans are also in support of fixing our broken immigration system. Not just Democrats, not just independents, but our Republican colleagues and Republican families throughout this country, all in support of common sense immigration reform. It's time for our Republican leadership in the House to give us a vote. Stop blocking a vote. Let us have a path to fix our broken immigration system, and let us have a common sense immigration reform that includes a path to citizenship for those who can show that they have earned it. It's time, and we'll take some questions.
Mr. Becerra, are you, the Democratic Caucus, ready to file for discharge petition tomorrow?
We will be filing tomorrow a discharge petition, a petition for a vote in the House of Representatives. We want everyone throughout the country to join with us on this petition. And we would ask those who are interested to join us on dems.gov on our website. If you're interested in signing a petition, join us on dems.gov, and you'll be able to help sign that petition to show the Republican leadership that we want to vote so we can take care of this broken immigration system. Yeah, Mike.
On the Ukraine, the Senate bill has the IMF language, the House bill does not. Senator Hoyer said yesterday that he supports the IMF language but would not insist upon it if it was going to slow down the process. Is that also the sentiment of you and the caucus?
Well, we certainly need the reforms to the IMF, and those reforms would help us in our efforts to help Ukraine and Crimea. So I would hope that what we would be doing is putting forward the best package possible. And since in the Senate, by 78 votes, this bipartisan package passed, we would hope in the House of Representatives we would have that opportunity to pass that as well. The difficulty, as I pointed out and the Vice Chair pointed out, is that we hear that there's some shenanigans being played in the House where Republican leaders are, if not demanding, certainly calling for some horse trading for a provision that has nothing to do with Ukraine and Crimea and has everything to do with politics, with the Koch brothers who've been funding so many of these political campaigns and trying to provide a shield of protection for political donors. I would hope that that's not the case, because if everyone agrees that there's a critical circumstance in Ukraine and Crimea, that we should act as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible to help out Ukraine, a friend at this time. So we would hope they would move, and I suspect some of my colleagues have some comment as well. Let me have colleagues comment, then we can go. Mr. Vice Chairman or anyone else?
I think he said it all. I think the shenanigans that we're up to, and we're dealing with a crisis. This is not something that we can play out like they typically have done with everything else, creating false deadlines. There's no false deadline here. There's no man-made deadline. This is a real, right now happening crisis in Ukraine and needs to be dealt with immediately. And as the chairman points out, the changes to the IMF will actually increase the amount of funding to Ukraine. And that's what's the point here. We should be trying to find ways to enhance the funding to Ukraine and bring the stability that's needed in Ukraine now. It's not going to get better weeks from now. It's probably going to get worse. That's why we need to move more quickly.
But would House Dems insist upon it?
Well, look, I think what we'd be very concerned about, and look, the number is important to us in terms of how much assistance and aid we are worldwide are going to be giving or helping Ukraine with. I think there are real serious concerns about diminishing democracy here in the United States to promote democracy elsewhere. They ought not be combined together. The issue of the IRS provisions does not belong in this debate. We can have this discussion. If this is something that people want to have a discussion on the floor about, we can talk about it, but it doesn't belong in this debate.
Isn't it like giving aid and comfort in Putin?
Well, you know, I don't think I'll take it to that. I don't think anyone, Democrat nor Republican at this point, holds Mr. Putin in high regard. What I would suggest is that using this crisis as a means to promote a political agenda here is not welcome.
Mr. Crowley, just to pick up on your point about the immediacy, that's how I expressed it to Mr. Hoyer yesterday. Since you got Russian troops on the border, is the urgency now so edgy that you might be willing to forego, the Democratic Caucus might be willing to forego the IMF reform?
Well, that's a separate issue, and that is more a legitimate issue in terms of the immediacy. What I'm speaking about is bringing ancillary or other, not even ancillary, issues that are not even related to the issue of the crisis in Ukraine into this debate, and that's what I think is very dangerous.
Put a fine point on it. Will you forego the IMF reforms in exchange for getting a bill through Congress more quickly to get aid to the Ukraine?
I would prefer to see us move quickly to get as much assistance and aid as possible to Ukraine as we possibly can.
If you've got a full loaf and someone says, now let's just send half a loaf for the same price, why would you send half a loaf? If you can resolve this the right way, in a robust way, and right now the Ukrainians need a robust response from us, why would we be diminishing, why would we be staining the ability to do the best job we can because of politics, because something that relates not to the IMF, but to the IRS and the protection of political donors? That's unseemly. Let's have that argument out in the open and publicly. Rather than do it behind closed doors, let's have the Republican leadership explain why they're trying to cut a deal that protects their political donors at the expense of the Ukrainians. Let's have that public debate and then see where we go. I think then we'll be able to go with that bipartisan solution that passed in the Senate by 78 votes out of 100 votes. That's pretty simple. There's no reason why we should be delaying. The immediacy here is the Senate bill that passed on a substantial bipartisan majority. That's the immediacy. And if we really care about immediacy getting support to Ukraine and Crimea, we would be acting on the bipartisan bill that passed out of the Senate, not talking about horse trading with some kind of deal for political donors.
How much pressure does the ANCBL figures on immigration reform you think will have on the Republicans?
Pablo, this is big because we constantly hear those detractors for immigration reform say, oh, it's not good for our economy. Oh, it's not good for American workers. It's not a good deal for this country. Their cheap talk is not good for this country because they're keeping us from having $200 billion in deficit reduction, which we could use. They're keeping us from having close to $1 trillion in economic capacity move forward, because that's what CBOS told us that this would do. It would generate more economic activity, more GDP growth. And so the reality is those who are blocking a vote on immigration reform, who are working against the American people, are the ones should understand that they're the ones that are making it difficult for our country to move forward. This is a big deal that the Congressional Budget Office, the nonpartisan fiscal referee for Congress, has said, you get 10 years you get $200 billion worth of deficit reduction. That ain't chomp change.
Briefly in Spanish, the discharge petition, please.
Estamos haciendo una petición a nuestros colegas republicanos que tienen control de la Cámara de Representantes, que nos permiten el voto para una reforma migratoria, porque ya es tiempo. Hemos esperado bastante y sabemos que tenemos no solo la mayoría del pueblo detrás de nosotros, apoyando una reforma migratoria, pero que tenemos los colegas republicanos y demócratas que quieren votar en favor de esta reforma. Es tiempo de permitir un voto. Esta petición que entregamos oficialmente mañana empieza el proceso para ver verdaderamente quién está en favor de una reforma y quién está con nosotros y quién no. Ojalá nuestros colegas republicanos se unen con nosotros para votar, firmar en favor de esta petición, y le pedimos al pueblo que por favor se unen con nosotros en el sitio de web dems.gov, 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 para registrarse también en favor de esta petición, para que sepa el liderazgo republicano que ya estamos listos para el voto para reformar el sistema roto. Yes.
Last week there was the meeting with the president regarding deportations. You were present for that. If there were strong executive action on deportations, would that not complicate efforts to actually see comprehensive immigration reform through the House? And when do you expect the results of the DHS review to come?
Well, and I think all three of my colleagues may want to comment on this, especially Mr. Horsford, given the action that he took on behalf of constituent Brian and his mother Thelma. But what I would tell you is this. The president has always had some discretion in the implementation of laws. It's not just President Obama who's had this discretion. President Bush has used the discretion, Clinton before him, Bush one before him, Reagan, and so forth. All presidents have had the discretion to make sure that they use the authority granted by Congress to put in force our laws. And so we saw the president use that discretionary power to make sure that young men and women, the dreamers in America, are not deported and have a chance to wait till we pass immigration reform. And so we believe that there are ways that the president can work within the confines of a broken immigration system to make a broken set of laws work as best possible. Be smart. Don't separate families who we know in the future are going to have a chance to work together here in this country. And so we're trying to work with the president to make sure that as we enforce our immigration laws, we're going after those who are dangerous, criminals, or trying to do us harm. That's where our focus should be, not on taking Thelma from her son Brian at a time that she's working so hard, and he's going to be a very productive member of society as well. So there is discretion that the president can use. if Republicans say that that's the reason they won't go forward, they must understand that they're blocking reform of a broken immigration system almost demands that we do something. Unless the Republicans are saying that Thelma should have been separated from Brian and that Stephen should not have worked hard to make sure that they could have stayed together. It's crazy when a valedictorian is being told, congratulations, you've graduated from high school and been accepted to the best universities in this country. And by the way, now we're going to deport you. That doesn't make sense. And so if Republicans think that doing nothing makes sense, I think the public will send them a very clear message because they are not for doing nothing. I see if my colleagues have any response.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just follow up to say you're absolutely right. To say that the House Republicans can use that as a reason, it's actually using it as an excuse. Doing nothing, passing no comprehensive immigration reform, does nothing to strengthen and secure our borders. It does nothing to address our workforce needs at a time when the private sector is asking for reforms to our workforce visa program. It does nothing to address the deficit, which the CBO report says H.R. 15 reduces the deficit by $200 billion in a decade. And it does nothing to keep families together. And you know what's frustrating? So many times we sit on the floor and we listen to our colleagues on the other side of the aisle talk about family values and what Congress should be doing to preserve family values. What is more fundamental than a family value that keeps families like Brian and Thelma together? By doing nothing, they're tearing families apart. They are co-conspirators in tearing families apart. And that is why Speaker Boehner, as one person, can choose to decide to bring H.R. 15 or any other version of a comprehensive immigration reform bill to the floor so that we can give the majority of Americans what they want, a vote on immigration reform. To do nothing is actually to contribute to the problem, and House Republicans will have made it worse for families, not better.
I would just say that there are far too many families that are being split apart from the deportations. We've heard from many people around the country, and we do believe that the president can do more to stop those. But really, the best way to stop the deportations is to pass a comprehensive immigration reform bill. It is the way to fix our situation once and for all, and that's why we have to advocate to have a more just deportation policy, but also have to push so hard on H.R. 15 and the discharge petition.
I will just say briefly, my colleagues have said it all. In fact, I think if you were looking for the ultimate soundbite, Mr. Horsford has already given it to you.
Can I just mention that this is where Mr. Boehner, the Speaker, and Republicans are standing. They're standing with the small minority that prefers that we do nothing. This is who he's getting in the way of. The vast majority of Americans who want to get this done. Just give us a vote. We're not asking Speaker Boehner to vote yes for comprehensive immigration reform. We're just asking that he give those members in Congress a chance to do what we got elected to do, and that's vote. Let's do some work. We spent an hour voting yesterday. We're going to be done by mid-afternoon today. We'll be done by mid-afternoon tomorrow with legislative business, and then we're gone by Thursday. That's it. Why can't we have a vote on something the American people have been demanding for quite some time, and that a majority of members of Congress support? We already know this has been a do-nothing Congress, but there's no reason to put icing on that really terrible tasting cake. Let's get some work done. Let's pass the assistance to Ukraine now without having political shenanigans get in the way. Let's pass a fix to our broken immigration system. Let's get some things done. That's why we get elected, to get things done. Stop putting party before country. Stop being so out of touch. Let's just get some things done. Thanks all very much.